Good afternoon, this is Daniel here with Cops and Cons TV. I just want to welcome everyone into our live show today. So what we're going to do like every week is go over some of the most important stories and police related issues and stories that came out this week. And there's a lot this week. I know I say that all the time, but this week there really is. So we have two different body cam videos that are supposed to come out today. One of them already came out. It's the Paul Pelosi video. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that. Also, we've got protests and riots in Atlanta, and the top case is what's going on in Memphis. So that's what I'm going to get to first. But I just want to welcome everyone in today. So I know we asked you where you're from. It looks like we have someone from North Carolina, Dallas, also someone in from Scotland. So want to welcome everyone in today. And I just want to remind you, if you could please subscribe to our channel and make sure you share it to your friends and family so more people can get in on our live shows. We do put out excellent and raw body cam footage every single week, but the live show we do on Fridays around lunchtime, usually 12 o'clock Mountain Time. So please go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to subscribe to any of my channels, it's over at Police Law News, over at YouTube, TikTok, Substack, just about everywhere. So again, I want to welcome everyone in. And while I'm going through these stories and cases, and some of this stuff like the Paul Pelosi video we're going to get into, that just dropped about an hour ago, and the Memphis case we're going to talk about, that video hasn't come out yet. So there could be some information that come out even in the last few minutes while I'm going over some of these cases. So definitely feel free to put your opinions, thoughts, if you want to discuss or debate. Definitely put that in the chat so we can go back and forth. And again, I want to welcome everyone in. Thank you so much. Let's see, Gorgeous Junk's got a question already. How about you start with the Tyre Nichols video? Gorgeous Junk, how did you know? That's exactly where I'm going. So this case is an absolute, and we have to start there because it is the most important case that's going on this week, and it isn't close. So this case is just a mess in Memphis. Let me give you a little bit of the background, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts about this case, and please put in your opinions in there. So this happened on January 7th, and this is in Memphis. And I should start by saying that we don't have the body cam footage yet, so we don't know what happened. It's going to drop sometime today, but it's only fair to say that what I'm reporting, what I'm saying, is completely based on what's been said in the media. We have a statement from the family attorney, we have a statement from Ben Crump, we have a statement from the district attorney, and from the police chief. So the veracity of those individuals, I think everyone can make their own determination about that, but some of the consistent information and the objective information, like the police officers being charged, I think we can kind of look at that, the objective facts that we have so far, on their own merits, but it's 100% reasonable to say we don't know exactly what happened yet. So let me talk about this mess in Memphis case. So this is going back to January 7th in Memphis, Tennessee. There's an individual, he's 29 years old. His name is Tyre Nichols. He's driving a vehicle. He allegedly is driving the vehicle in a reckless manner, and he's stopped by police officers. Once he's stopped by police officers, the allegation is that he ran from the scene. So there was some kind of a foot chase. During the foot chase, police officers didn't just let him go. They decided to also chase after Mr. Nichols. At some point, they caught him, and what's being reported is that there was a confrontation. There was a use of force, and Mr. Nichols eventually was arrested. Once he was under arrest, the report is that he complained of shortness of breath. The ambulance was called, and he was transported to the hospital. He was transported to the hospital, and he died 3 days later on January 10th. So this has caused outrage, as you absolutely can imagine. It pretty much is earlier this week, so within 10 days or so of Mr. Nichols passing away, there were 5 involved police officers, is what everyone is saying, the police chief and the DA. The 5 police officers who were involved to in one extent or another, either in using force or not stopping officers from using force, they have all been terminated. As of yesterday, the district attorney's office decided to charge all 5 of those officers with the same charges. He charged them with second-degree murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and official misconduct. Now let's talk about this here really quick. Let's get into some of the other issues around this. So Tyre Nichols is an African-American, and all 5 police officers are African-American as well. Ben Crump has been retained as a family attorney as well, probably going to file a civil rights violation, civil rights violation in this case, which you would expect. But early on in this case, Ben Crump said something that I have never heard him say this about a case. He said, this isn't about race. So just him saying that might quell some of the violence that we can expect to happen with the release of this body cam footage. So he did say it's not about race, but again, Mr. Nichols and all 5 police officers are African American. A couple of things that we know about this case. What's also interesting is that 2 ambulance workers, medics for the city fire department, they have also been put on leave and or terminated in relation to this. So it's unknown how they were involved, if they were on scene when some of this happened, or if their initial medical evaluation just wasn't up to par. It's unknown, but it's strange for medics to also be charged in a case like this. So let's see if anybody has any questions while we're going through, and then I'm going to give some of my thoughts about this case. Let's see. Gorgeous Junk says, Ben Crump and the family are holding a press conference as we speak. Yes, I believe that they are. Georgia has declared a state of emergency ahead of the video being released. Yes, Georgia has called for a state of emergency, but Georgia called for the state of emergency reference a different case, which I'm going to talk about next. And I really wish people would comply instead of being knuckleheads, Gorgeous Junk. Yes, okay, so that's where I want to go with this, Gorgeous Junk. So I think that there's an important question to ask, is that because I posted a couple videos on my TikTok about this the last couple days, and one of the comments was, why didn't he just comply? So it's not unreasonable to ask that question, but 2 things can be true at the same time. Yes, we want Mr. Nichols and anyone else who deals with police officers to comply, but also that doesn't excuse excessive force or unlawful use of force from police officers. Both things can be true at the same time. So a couple of my thoughts about this, really starting with that, is that what we should be encouraging people to do is to comply. Don't run, don't fight. Because the probability of being harmed by police drops to literally almost 0 if you comply and don't run or fight from the police. The result that I want in any arrest or any case or any interaction with police is less violence. That's what I want all around, from an individual to police or police to an individual. I want less violence. Where that starts is not only with reasonable police officers, but with people not running and fighting. So I think it's a fair thing to say that yes, he should have just not ran from police and complied. If he had done that, then none of this would have happened. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. But also on that, fleeing from police should not be a death sentence. So running from police officers, yes, that is a crime. It's typically a misdemeanor crime, so it's a low-level crime. And guess what? The police officers, they're not the victims of that crime. So for some reason, when people run from police officers, they take it personally. This is not personal. The reason why people run is they're running because they don't want to be held responsible for their actions. They're not running as a personal sign of disrespect towards the police officer. And when officers are in the moment, they have to realize that yes, fleeing from police is a crime. Cops aren't the victim of that. Also, we should say that, incidents of people dying due to police officers' unlawful use of force are statistically incredibly rare. And one awful incident that we all denounce doesn't change that math. So those are some of my thoughts about this case. Let's see what the comments are. I bet it's going to be interesting. Gorgeous Junk, I saw the pic of Tyre in the hospital bed and it looked pretty bad. I agree. What is in the hospital bed absolutely looked pretty bad. And let's go with what the information that we have right now. So we have a picture of him in the hospital bed, and yeah, it absolutely looks terrible. Now, the family attorney, who's a local attorney, can't remember his name, but he's a local attorney in the Memphis area, and Ben Crump have essentially said that they and the family were able to watch the body cam video a couple days ago. And again, because of what Ben Crump and other attorneys like him have said after the Jacob Blake case, where they watched the video before anyone else and then outright lied about it to the public. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in what Ben Crump says. However, what I do put stock in is what the district attorney and what the police chief say, because the police chief did fire the police officers really quickly. She said she's a 36-year veteran of being in policing. The police chief said that she was horrified by what she saw in that video. The family attorney, not Ben Crump, the local family attorney, said that the beating went on with Mr. Nichols, 5 police officers and Mr. Nichols, he says for 3 minutes, and that Mr. Nichols was I quote, a piñata to those officers. So again, I'm not saying that's true, and we absolutely should wait to see the body cam video, but this is an attorney who isn't Ben Crump, and he said something specific, that there was a beating that went on for 3 minutes. I'm going to be very honest. If we watched, I would be very surprised and shocked that if we see this video, that there is something other than Mr. Nichols being beaten for 3 minutes. And what I always say is if you're a police officer and if somebody runs, yes, go ahead and chase them. That's completely reasonable to do. If you catch them and they actively resist, yes, use reasonable, necessary, proportional force in order to achieve the lawful objective of getting them into custody. That's fine. But once the active resistance stops, once the handcuffs are on, the fight is over. Period. And listen, even if the handcuffs aren't on, when you have 5 officers against 1 person, there is almost no amount of active resistance that the person can possibly do that would warrant a beating of 3 minutes. And again, I'm not saying that's what happened. That's what's being alleged. However, what's being alleged by the family attorneys seems like it's being corroborated by the police chief and by the district attorney. It's very rare that a police chief would come out very shortly after, really before there's charges filed or anything, and say that the police officers exhibited excessive force and they failed to render aid. So again, it's rare for a police chief, and this was said earlier in the week, it's just rare for a police chief to come out and make these statements if it's not true. There really isn't anything to gain from the city or the police department to essentially admit fault so early on unless it's bad. And I would reasonably expect this video is going to be bad. We should prepare for it. It's going to be awful to watch. That is my prediction on it. Let's see, Reds General District Court. Hey, good morning, Reds. I was thinking about the interrogations while I was doing dishes, and I wondered, are police immune from prosecution if they confess to a crime during an interrogation of a suspect? Let's see. So, Reds General District Court. Let me see if I can break down your question. So, if police officers commit a crime while they're interrogating a suspect, are they immune from being prosecuted for that crime? If that's your question, the answer is no. So, the only time where maybe what you're getting into, the only time where police officers might be immune to something is under the following circumstance. So, in most cases, probably not in this case because the officers, have been fired already, but what happens in most cases is that there's a criminal investigation. Whenever there's, some evidence that there's unlawful use of force, typically what happens is there's a parallel investigation. The district attorney or an outside police agency or the feds handled the criminal investigation against the police officer. So a different agency or some type of a task force looks into criminal charges. The police department itself does an internal investigation. Well, the police department is the government, right? And as part of their internal investigation, they want the police officers or anyone who's involved to give statements. Well, think about it this way. Being an employee of the police department, you don't have a choice. You have to give a statement if your employer, the police department, wants to question you. So Reds, maybe this is where you're going, that if it's an administrative investigation, not criminal, if it's an administrative investigation, and if the police department is essentially forcing you to do that under threat of being fired, those statements generally can't be used against you in a criminal setting at all. They can't be referenced, they can't be used. Because again, everybody has the right to, the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate themselves, and that you don't lose that right just because you're a police officer. So whereas the police department administratively, when it comes to policies, can force you to talk and then fire you because of your statements and your actions, but that can't be used against you in any criminal proceeding most of the time. Again, there's the Freddie Gray case where it was a little murky, and we're getting into the weeds with the law. I don't know how interested people are in that like I am, but that's to answer your question. Let's see. So in other words, you are, Henry says, so in other words, you are exploiting the obvious conflict of poverty and justice system. I don't have any idea what that means. Gorgeous Junk says, this is worse than Rodney King. If this is worse than Rodney King, Lord help us, because the country is about to be in fire. Well, maybe, Gorgeous Junk, maybe that's possible. But, if we look at it from the city, so there's a reason that the body cam footage is being released today after the police officers have been fired, and also after the police officers have been charged with serious felony crime. So when the body camera footage comes out, at least the city and the managers and everyone's able to say, yes, this is bad, this is horrific, we know it. We've already taken the action. So there's no reason to go into the streets and violence and asking for justice, because we want justice too. We want justice so bad. In fact, we fired the police officers and they're being prosecuted for second-degree murder. So the idea, so a lot lot of times protests come about almost reasonably when the police do something that's wrong or seems illegal, and it's not being taken serious because, typically protests, people want something, So if you have a situation where let's say people want charges to be filed against a police officer in an officer-involved shooting. So let's say, let's go back to Ferguson, Missouri. Darren Wilson. The protesters wanted Darren Wilson to be charged with some type of crime. Unfortunately, he didn't. Well, unfortunately for the protesters, fortunately for Mr. Wilson, he didn't commit a crime, so he wasn't charged. But that's what the protesters were asking for. So if you look at this situation, obviously people who want to come in and they just want to riot and burn down stores, and they really don't want anything from the police except for anarchy and chaos. They're going to come either way, no matter what. But like people who are honestly want justice for Tyre Nichols, I don't know what they would be protesting about. The cops have been fired quickly and they're being prosecuted. So I almost disagree. This body cam footage comes out. Even if it's worse than Rodney King, even if it's worse than the George Floyd video, I do not think that national protests are going to be anywhere near what we saw in 2020. But I guess next week when we do the show, we'll be able to confirm or deny that. But that is my opinion. Let's see. Aussie Wendelkin, why no UK police badges? Oh, that's such a good question. If you want to go ahead and send us a police patch from the UK, we would be happy to put it up front and center. So definitely send us a message. We can give you the contact information to get that to us. Anyone who wants to send us patches, that's where we get a lot of these, is by nice people sending them in. All right, let's see. Art Vandelay. So Seinfeld is my favorite show of all time. So Art Vandelay is a Seinfeld reference, and I just want to say that I appreciate that. Art Vandelay, who happens to be an architect, it's going to be open season on free air Jordans and flat screen TVs. Yeah, that's possible. Like I said, the people who if someone's goal is to riot and cause chaos and destroy things, they're going to use anything as an excuse. So that's going to happen no matter what. But hopefully, if there's less, and what they try to do is they try to blend in with honest protesters who have like a legitimate beef with the government or with the police department, and they try to blend in and use those honest people as covers. Because if you're protesting is completely legal and reasonable. It's an important thing in our country. It's part of our First Amendment right. Rioting, burning down local businesses and stealing TVs from Best Buy, that isn't protesting. Those two things are different. And the people who are doing the rioting definitely try to blend in with the protesters. So my point is, if there's less protesters, which I think they're going to be, less protesters, then there's probably going to be less awful rioters as well. Let's see. Sleeping Bear says, okay, something about God. Ego 10, what charges could possibly be placed on the armed patron in Houston that killed the guy robbing the place? Ego 10, we'll get to that here in a few. Good question. I covered that the last couple weeks. Tara Bostic, love your channel. Thank you so much, Tara. Let's see. And yeah, Steve Ladner, people protest because a cop can beat up a man on video and receive an apology from the judge and a $100 fine. Let's see, people protest because a cop can beat up a man and receive, I don't understand what that means, Steve. Sorry. You can go ahead and rephrase, and I will get to your comment. But again, those are some of my thoughts on this case. The video is going to come out. We're all going to see it, and I'm telling you, it isn't going to be good. The police chief, the city, and the district attorney have no reason to be dishonest, knowing the video is going to come out. And if they said something that isn't true, knowing a video is going to come out in a couple days, that literally does nothing for them. Yes, lying and being dishonest, yeah, that absolutely helps Ben Crump and the family attorney, no matter what. They always benefit if they can incite more people to be mad about it. But because a lot of these statements are from the city, are from the police chief, and from the DA's office, I'm expecting that they are appropriately bracing people to see this awful video that is coming out. Aussie, love the channel. Thank you so much. That is so nice. Jorik, no protest as it's not part of the media narrative. Yeah, so let's talk about that. I think that's a fair thing to talk about. So I think what you're referencing is a lot of people are saying is that, kind of like what Ben Crump says, that this case isn't about race. If this were 5 white police officers, so a lot of people are saying if it were 5 white police officers who did this, the same actions, just different color skin, that yes, that not only would Memphis be burning down, but the entire country would be burning down. I think that's probably true. But because that's not the case, and because Ben Crump specifically came out publicly and said it's not about race. A lot of the racial issues I don't think are going to be there in this case. And the fact that that's going to be absent, I think there's going to be less violence and less rioting. Just my opinion, but I think that we will see. Let's see. No other questions on this case, but again, this video is going to come out. We'll definitely get to it next week. So the next case I want to talk about, so someone mentioned that Governor Kemp in Georgia declared a state of emergency, and he did. And part of it could be because of this video release, but really, so earlier this week, the story that I thought that I was going to lead with is this Atlanta story that I'm going to get to right now, because there have been riots in Atlanta, and it's been absolutely crazy. Let me explain why. So Atlanta Police Department, Atlanta's a huge city. It's a huge police department, but for the last several years, for whatever reason, they don't have like a central, really good training center for police officers, and they've been using temporary locations all around the Atlanta area. Well, there was an idea, from the government leaders. Hey, let's build a state-of-the-art police training center for not just Atlanta police, but all police around. Let's make like a hub of a training center. They're going to put it, there's this forested area on the outskirts of Atlanta, and that was going to be the site of it. It essentially was going to be on 85 acres, and it was going to cost $90 million. They've kind of been unofficially calling it Cop City, but essentially it's going to be a state-of-the-art training center for police officers. Well, people are mad about this. I'm not really sure why. Maybe people in the comments can tell me. People are absolutely mad about this. So anti-police activists, they're mad about everything, right? So we know that they're going to be upset no matter what the police do. If the police make a training center and they get the best training in the world, anti-police activists, just like they are, they're going to complain and get mad about it. If police don't train and they don't make the effort to have a good training center, and there's an incident or an officer involved shooting, those same exact activists are going to say, you guys don't even care enough about the people. You're not even trying to get trained or to learn to learn what best practices are. That's what I mean when I say dishonest critics. Dishonest critics are going to criticize police no matter what they do. If they do great training at a training center, they're going to get mad. If they do no training, they're going to get mad at that too. So we can't really listen to those people, but that's what we have with most anti-police activists, is that they are dishonest critics, and we really shouldn't pay any attention to them. So those people are going to be mad no matter what. So they're mad at the Cop City thing because they said that they don't want this giant training center there. But because it's in a forested area that's going to have to be bulldozed, this 85 acres, you got environmental activists who are also involved in this as well, and that's never a good combination when you get the anti-police people and the crazy people, the environmental loonies. It never goes well. So what happened is on January 18th. So they have this site. They haven't they kind of started the building process, but most of it is vacant. So what police do is they're every now and then, every day, every couple days, they're told by their chain of command to, hey, go to the area because this is this is a building site. Anyone who's hanging around, get them off the building site. It's dangerous. We can't have them there. That's a reasonable thing, right? So but there are these people who call themselves forest defenders. I don't know what that is. To me, it sounds nuts. But these people are forest defenders that are essentially camping on or near the property, saying that they're defending the forest. They chain themselves to trees, and they do all that kind of stuff. And they live in tents all around the place. I mean, to me, it seems like if this is something that you're honestly concerned about, and let's say that there's a reasonable concern. So let's give them credit. There's a reasonable concern for some reason that this is a bad site. Okay, this is a bad site to do this training center. One person with a tent, you seem like a nut, okay? Go to your city councilor. Try to do some type of legislation, a bill, go to city meetings. Like, that's the way to influence change. It's not to sit with a tent as a crazy person screaming at birds and chain yourself to trees. Yeah, so it's... Yeah, the funny thing is that they're anti-oil, they're anti-gas, but the tent is made from oil and gas. So again, none of this makes any sense. You have John Kerry, who's really big on this, but he's taking private jets all around the world. Again, none of this makes any logical sense, right? Anyway, so you have these forest defenders. Well, on January 18th, so not that long ago, January 18th, the police officers were clearing, and while they were clearing, there was a forest defender there whose name is let me find his name. He's got like 4 names. Oh, I'll get to here in a second. But Manuel Tehran. So they contact Manuel Tehran, who is this forest defender, and as police officers are trying to clear him out, he takes out a gun and he shoots at a state trooper. And he actually shoots a state trooper and injures the state trooper. Well, very predictably, the police officers fire back and they shoot him and they kill Mr. Tehran. Well, somehow this has caused all kinds of riots in the city of Atlanta. I mean, it's crazy over there right now. Police cars are burning down, businesses are being burned down, windows are being smashed, and this is one of the reasons. So all of this is going on where the governor probably was going. There's also been a lot of doxing online by these groups, such as Antifa of people in this area of the police officers as well. And so Governor Kemp, the governor of Georgia, the state of emergency is kind of for that because it's been absolutely crazy there. And now we have this body cam, the Memphis body cam that's coming out too. So I think that speaks to a little bit about the state of emergency. But during these riots that have been going on in Atlanta in this last week, 6 people, there's been a lot of arrests, but 6 people have been charged, the worst ones have been charged with domestic terrorism. And Brian Kemp, the governor, he actually came out the other day and he said that of the 6 people who were arrested, 5 of them weren't even from Georgia. So what he was saying and what that means is that essentially crazy people who are affiliated with Antifa and these other insane groups are flying into Georgia or driving into Georgia, and they're basically setting up their protests there. There's people who do this professionally. Wherever they see a little bit of a riot that they can incite to try to make it so that there's chaos everywhere, they just go. These people have no ties to Georgia, 5 of the 6. So I thought that was interesting. So they're essentially using this just objectively lawful and reasonable officer-involved shooting to riot and to just be awful humans in general. So that's what's going on in Atlanta. Jorek says Atlanta crime is getting out of control. No real anti-crime campaign that has been implemented. And I'm not local in Atlanta. I'll be honest there, Jorek. So I know that Atlanta is where the Garrett Rolfe case took place. So you had the DA who charged Garrett Rolfe, the police officer who killed Rayshard Brooks. So he was charged, and then a new DA came in sometime this summer or so because in the early fall, late summer, the charges were dismissed. So I guess my question is for anyone who is local there, is the fact that there's a new DA there who seems to be a little bit more reasonable and honest than the last DA. Has anything changed? Or, I mean, obviously I don't expect anything to change in 6 months, but I wonder if Atlanta is getting on the right track with, trying to build this awesome training center and for police officers and also the new DA there. And I just want to say this about training. So it's like we have incidents like Uvalde, and we could list all these other police incidents where we go, the police officers did a terrible job. We need officers to be more trained, more educated. We need to give them, so we say these things, so then police officers, or not police officers, police departments and cities and governments, they try to do these things like this cop city, this, huge training facility in Atlanta, and then people complain about it. It's almost as if that the people who are complaining the most about police don't want police to get good training. They don't want police to have best practices and best tactics, because when there is an officer-involved shooting that is a little bit questionable, that's their opportunity to riot. And if there's less of those, there's less opportunity to riot and cause chaos. So what is the goal of these people? I think that's an important question to ask. I know what I think. All right, let's see. Steve says, Steve Ladner, it's too dangerous to work the oil fields after dark in South Texas, but police will attack, but police will attack citizens and write tickets for going 2 miles over the speed limit to justify their jobs. Disagree there, Steve. Again, if you can provide any evidence and data to what you said, you show me a case where someone was stopped for 2 miles an hour. They didn't resist arrest. They didn't fight with police, and there was an unlawful use of force found against a person. You find me one case. The thing is, Steve, even if you could find me 100 cases of that a day, that would mean that 99.99999% of the time, police officers didn't do that. So you're not going to find 100 of those cases. You're not even going to find 3 of those cases. But again, either there were 100 a day, well over 99.999% of the time, police officers didn't do that. So again, one bad incident from police that we all think is bad simply doesn't change the math when it comes to how statistically rare these things are. And I don't think people understand that, listen, just because you see 1 or 2 videos on the internet, that doesn't mean that the other 250 million annual citizens police contact are like that. It means the exact opposite. The reason you're seeing it on the internet is because it was awful awful and we all think it's awful, and the other, 99.99% of police interactions are pretty boring and nothing happens and police officers act in a reasonable manner, that's why you aren't watching them. Let's see, we got, our Jorik says the Antifa members are really spoiled rich kids. Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. Jorik, I believe there was a Democratic congressperson's, I can't remember her name, but she was the Democratic whip, and her daughter was just arrested in this last week for being part of an Antifa protest and riot where she caused a bunch of damage. So yeah, I think you're absolutely correct there that does happen. All right, the next case that I want to talk about, and this is such a weird case. So, I've told you before that I am a fan of body cameras, not just because I'm here on a body cam channel where we find the most interesting and raw police body cam footage and we put it out there for everyone to see because we think it's just such an interesting thing for citizens and regular people just to be able to watch the interactions between police officers and citizens while they're on call, while they're on different calls for service. So I'm not just biased for body cameras because of that, but I think it's good for transparency in government. So I love body cameras, been a huge fan of body cameras really as soon as they came out. But a lot of people aren't. So if you ever argue with a police officer who doesn't like body cameras, make sure that you show them this clip or you direct them back to this story, because here's what happened. And the body cam footage of this just came out, so that's why I'm getting to the story now. But back in North Carolina, back a couple months ago in August of 22, police officers went to a call for service at a home. Essentially, this call was for a mental health pickup order. Now, let me explain a little bit of what that is. So many states, including North Carolina, essentially have laws that say if you meet these criteria, if you're having a mental health illness, if you're having a mental health, if you're in mental health crisis, and if you meet certain elements, the police officers or your doctor can basically file a form and basically say, we're going to do an involuntary commitment where you have to go in for a mental health evaluation. And that's one of the ways that even if you didn't commit a crime, police officers are legally allowed to take your freedom away and make you go for a mental health evaluation. Now, every state is a little bit different with what that criteria is. Most of the time, it's one of three things have to be in effect in order for police officers or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a doctor to issue this order. So the elements that normally have to be there, it's one of the three. Either one, you are a threat to yourself. Two, you are making a threat to others, or you are in such mental health decline that it's grave passive neglect. Essentially, that would be someone who is not taking care of themselves to a dangerous level, where if they don't get some help, they might die. You can imagine a situation with someone who's in mental health decline, who is just not eating, they aren't drinking, and they're just laying around, and basically either the police or the doctor says if they don't get some help, they're going to die because they're neglecting themselves. So typically one of those three things has to be in place, and then they can do these. It's called something different in every single state, but essentially it's an involuntary mental health pickup order. So that's the case here. This lady's name is Brenda Donahue, and the police officers were forwarded from her doctor one of these mental health pickup orders. And again, it's like a warrant, so it's not one of those things where, like someone's example, where someone's going 2 miles an hour over and the police officer stop them because they're bored or trying to justify their job. No, this is something that a doctor sends into the police department, the dispatcher sends it to the police officer, and the police officer doesn't have a choice. Like, they literally have to go to this call and try to do this. It's like serving a warrant. They don't have a choice. It's not like the dispatcher can send and they go, I don't really feel like doing this. It seems like a pain in the ass. I'm gonna go sit behind a gas station. No, the police officers have to go once they get this call. And they're not the ones who initiated it, it was a doctor. So that's kind of the background of this. So this pickup order was for Brenda Donahue. Police officers get there to the scene. Once they get there to the scene, someone lets them into the house and they confirm that this is Brenda's house, Miss Donahue's house, and that she's home. The individual who opens the door says she's upstairs. Police officers start walking upstairs. As they're walking up the stairs, she pulls out a gun and she starts shooting at police officers. Predictably, like in the Atlanta case, police officers fired back and they shot and they killed Miss Donahue. What's crazy about this, and we're going to show you a picture here in a second, but what's absolutely crazy about this is that one of the bullets hit the body camera. One of the bullets that she fired hit the body camera on the police officer and essentially saved the police officer's life. Look at this picture. This is absolutely crazy. This is wild. So again, this is just another reason for police officers to embrace body cams. So if you ever talk to a police officer who's against body cams, make sure you let them know about this case about Miss Donahue in North Carolina. It's an absolutely crazy case. I would never expect a body camera to do that, but it probably saved the police officer's life. Yeah, and I just want to say that, but the body camera was damaged. So the body camera was an absolute casualty. And I know that there are actually some police departments out there that would start an internal affairs investigation against the police officer for damaging city property. So, hopefully you don't work for a police department like that, but we know that that is a thing out there. So let's see. Remnant Truth says, Mad World, when the poster board markers come out. Okay, I don't know what that means. Let's see. CCAS says, don't run, don't fight cops on the side of the road, fight them in court. CCAS, that is my point exactly. It's 100% my point. You said it for me, 100%. Steve Ladner, let's see. My point is the fact that it's unsafe to work after dark, but police that claim to keep everyone safe are busy writing tickets because they are afraid to screw with the cartels. Again, Steve, I'm not sure how valid that point is. Because it sounds like what you're saying is that police officers who work in rural Michigan aren't fighting cartels, but they're writing tickets to get drunk drivers off the road. And you have a problem with that somewhere in northern Michigan, that they should be worried about cartels. Again, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but thank you for the comment, Steve. Again, but I'm be honest, not making a whole lot of sense. Let's see. Kermit the Frog says, these dudes hate the cameras. So I kind of disagree on that, Kermit. So I think, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. So Kermit the Frog won. So, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when body cameras came out, yes, police, I think, were apprehensive about it. They didn't like it. But now, over 80% of police officers around the country have body cameras. And most of the time, most police officers you talk to are going to say, I wouldn't go to work without one because it saved me so many times. And the thing is, just because the police officers, let's say if you don't have a body camera, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone video. Every business has a camera. There's traffic light cameras. So it's not like if you don't have a body camera that you can just do whatever you want and violate people's rights as a police officer because you're not on camera. Literally, wherever you are, even if you're in someone's house, they could have a security system. There's cameras everywhere, and police officers should always assume that they are on video. Let's see, Steve Ladner, if you lived in South Texas, it would make total sense. Maybe it would, Steve. I don't work in South Texas, though. Let's see. But what I do know is that I think border issues and cartels is probably federal. Local police probably don't work with the feds. So if what you're saying, Steve, is that you want border patrol and task forces with the ATF and FBI, if you want those task forces with the feds to have more funding for that stuff, if that's your point, I would go ahead and agree with you. To expect local police officers who don't, or if you're advocating for all police officers to get unbelievably extensive training on interdiction of drugs, if that's what you're advocating for, okay. If not, though, I'm not sure where we're going with this. Gorgeous Junk says, I think cops are afraid to do anything for fear of being charged and convicted. Gorgeous Junk, I think that exact same thing. Yes, there's apprehension on police officers to do a whole lot because they're afraid of getting convicted or charged just for doing their jobs. That's absolutely correct. Let's see. Remnant Truth says, just smile and act right because you're probably being filmed. Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. So even if you listen to some of the really popular police podcasts, like Failure to Stop is with Mike the Cop, is one of the ones I listen to all the time. But where I'm going with this, the reason I mention that is because if you listen to podcasts and real police officers talk about different things, when they talk about body cameras, literally every single one of them is pro body camera and says the same thing I'm saying, that at first they thought it was kind of a pain, but now there's no question that they think it does far more good and they wouldn't go to work without it. If you can find one public police officer or one podcast where police officers are anti-body camera in 2023, I would be very surprised, but definitely go ahead and share it in the chat. Even if it's after the show, put it in the chat because I definitely go through the comments throughout the week because I just don't think that you're going to find that that's the case with most police officers. Most police officers want the body cameras. Now, a lot of times, people who run police departments or sheriffs who have a budget, they're opposed to body cameras, not because they're opposed to the body cameras, but because the city council or the city just isn't giving them the funding to do it. You know, it's like an unfunded mandate. You can't say, I want body cameras, but we're not going to give you the $3 million a year to get them. Well, that's a different argument than saying that you're against body cameras. Let's see. Yeah, and there's lots of, and when it comes to body cameras, I should just say in defense of those sheriffs and other people, I should say that when it comes to the body camera, the cost of how expensive it is isn't just with the hardware. That's actually the lowest cost. It's the storage of the data and the video and how states mandate how long it has to be kept for. That is where the unbelievable amount of cost is. A lot of times the body cameras from Taser or Axon or whoever the body cameras from, a lot of times those are given to police departments almost for free or for like unbelievably discounted prices, but the cost where they get the police departments and the cities and the municipalities is in the cost of the storage of the data. So that's the absolute issue with that. But yeah, this is a case where if you have any police officers out there who are against body cameras, this is just another reason to embrace body camera videos. Okay, so the next story I'm going to talk about is this is one of my favorite segments I do, and I call it I'm Not Into Conspiracies, but... Yeah, and this is the Paul Pelosi video. Does anyone think it's strange that the video of Paul Pelosi being attacked by David DePape, that came out on the same day as the Memphis video is going to come out? Anyone thinks that's strange? I don't know. Again, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but this is a little strange. So the Paul Pelosi video dropped about an hour before we went on air. I did have a chance to watch it. So I had something prepared because the judge ordered yesterday that the Paul Pelosi video was going to come out. I knew it was going to hit today, but I didn't know when. So I actually had something prepared for the kind of leading up to it may be coming out. But now that it came out, I had a chance to watch it. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, make sure you do. There's about a 1 minute and 45-second clip out there. Let me go ahead and break it down and explain it to you, though. So here's what happens. The clip is the body camera from the police officers. It shows the police officers walk up to the house and they knock on the door. The door opens. When the door opens, and this is kind of like what I said when we first reported on this case, is that everything seems strange. It seems weird. We're getting little bits of information here and there, and it's going to be cleared up once we get the body camera footage. Well, at least for me, a lot of this was absolutely cleared up. So as the doors opened from the inside, it looks like it was Paul Pelosi. Now, a lot of people thought it was weird that Mr. Pelosi was attacked when the police were present, but that's absolutely what happened. So what the video shows is that as the door opens, the two individuals are standing, at least on the video, Paul Pelosi's on the right, David DePape is on the left, and Dave DePape, in his right hand, he's actually holding the arm and the wrist of Paul Pelosi. So, you know, because a lot of people said before the body cam video came out, like, well, when the police get there, why didn't Paul Pelosi just run to the police? Why didn't he just run past the police? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because Dave DePape was literally holding on to Paul Pelosi's arm. Not only was he holding on to Paul Pelosi's arm with one hand, but he had a hammer that was raised like this in the other hand. And you can tell that the police officers, you know, it's one of those things that police officers aren't superhuman. They're regular people. So when a door opens and your eyes see something that you're not expecting to see, it takes your brain a couple seconds to kind of put everything into perspective about what's happening. That happens to regular people. That happens to police officers. It seems like that's what happened in this case because, you know, as the door opened, you know, David DePape is holding the arm, you know, but he's got the hammer like this. You can see the police officers are kind of surprised by what they see, and they're trying to work it out in their brains what they're looking at, and they say something like, are you guys okay? And it was at that point that David DePape, almost out of nowhere, kind of gives this weird, blank, dead stare look in his eyes, and he takes the hammer, and he just starts going like this, and the bash Paul Pelosi over the head. The way that the door frame is you can see David DePape raise the hammer and go towards Paul Pelosi, but the actual strike, you know, they're kind of just out of frame behind the door frame, so you don't see it. But as soon as that happens, the police officers yell, "Oh shit!" and then they run up and they essentially tackle Mr. DePape on the ground. Now, from the body camera video, you can see a couple things. You can see part of David DePape's. We're going to play the body camera video here. Is there audio on this, producer? Okay, so let's watch the body cam footage of this, and we'll watch this together. Okay?
Yeah. Fucking said 2620, right? No, 2640. Oh, 40. Yeah, it literally said in there. Hi. How you doing?
How are you?
What's going on, man?
Everything's good.
Hi. Drop the hammer.
Nope.
Hey. What is going on right
I'm
now?
not getting an answer on call back.
Bro, oh shit.
Calls in the area that you sent an email.
I got him,
Look at the blood on the ground. You can see the blood that's coming out of Paul Pelosi's head. Okay, so we all just watched the body camera video. Don't know if you guys had seen that before, but to me, essentially, this makes a lot of the conspiracy theories look juvenile and just silly. So the idea that there was anything strange going on between these two, I mean, to me, this makes perfect sense of what happened. Yeah, so it pretty much debunks that they both were just in their underwear. I mean, like I said this when it first happened, that the idea that Paul Pelosi was in underwear is reasonable because this was 2:00 in the morning and he was asleep. Completely reasonable. So to me, all of the conspiracy theories around this seem pretty silly. And if you go back to one of our earlier episodes about this, I said this exact same thing, that I don't think that there's a conspiracy theory here, but we got to wait for the body camera footage. I think the body camera footage shows that I was right. What's strange is that not only, so the prosecutor against David DePape is the guy who attacked Paul Pelosi, not only did the prosecutor not want the body cam footage to come out, but also Paul Pelosi's defense also didn't want the body cam footage to come out. So I'm not sure why, because again, if you watch this, at least from the defense side, clearly it shows that Paul Pelosi was being held seemingly against him. He called police, being held seemingly against his will. And then the 82-year-old guy, whatever you think of the Pelosi's, was attacked with a hammer by an absolute maniac. You can see in the video there, if you watched it, where it kind of shows Paul Pelosi's head and you could see the blood running out. How he survived that, I don't know. Let's see. Art Vandelay, I hear him whisper one lump or two. Kermit the Frog, okay. Let's see. Why was Pelosi holding a drink? I have no idea, NHL Pens. I don't know why he was holding a drink. Again, I don't think that's relevant, but maybe it is. Maybe I'll be proved wrong on that. I think it pretty much shows he's being held against his will, and a crazy guy attacked him with a hammer, and police officers saved Paul Pelosi's life. I think that's what the video shows. That's what I take from it. Again, strange that it came out the same day as the Memphis video, but I was just joking about the conspiracy. That kind of stuff happens. And like I said, I explained why the Memphis video came out today. It's reasonable to drop it on a Friday because people are less likely to pay attention. Statistically, bad news comes out on Friday, so there's less likely people are going to be paying attention. And also, they wanted to wait until the police officers. They also wanted to. They wanted the police officers to be fired and charged first before they did it. It's a completely like inside the Beltway DC media move for Friday news drops when it's bad news. Let's see. CCAS shows support for local corrections officers. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Kermit the Frog, strange that a person that has 24/7 security has something like that happen. Well, Kermit the Frog, that would be strange if that were factual, and it's not. So there was no on-site security. So Nancy Pelosi has 24/7 security, but she wasn't in town. So that 24/7 security with Nancy wasn't there. There was no on-site security guard. So there is surveillance video of the Pelosi's house that is monitored remotely somewhere. However, it isn't always being watched in real time, and that's obviously what happened here. So there is no 24/7 security at this time, so that answers your question, Kermit the Frog. Let's see. Seems they were chilling when the door opened. Yeah, Remnant Truth. Yeah, you know what? I would say that's correct, because here's the thing. So, here's the thing. How many times do police officers take calls for service, domestics, disturbances, who knows what kind of call? As soon as someone opens the door, police officers, what we want police officers to do is say, hey, I'm Officer Blank with this police department. What's going on? You guys okay? Hey, can you talk to me out there? Like, that's what we want police officers. As soon as doors open, we don't expect police officers to fly in and start slamming people, right? Because if they did, anti-police critics, that's the first thing they would say is, as soon as they open the door, they just attack this guy. So no, when the door opens, you kind of see what's going on. And David DePape kind of had the hammer down and then he raised it. And again, it's one of the things where I don't think the police knew what they were looking at. They were trying to figure it all out. So yeah, I mean, but then obviously, as soon as the hammer attack happened, they went into action and they saved Mr. Pelosi's life. Let's see. Yeah, NHL pens, the whole thing is strange. That I agree with, 100% NHL. The whole thing is absolutely strange. Kermit the Frog, okay, then why would they not get 24/7 security? They definitely can afford it with the insider trading. Kermit the Frog, I agree with the insider trading. I agree that they can afford it. That's actually a point I made when this comes out. How there isn't an on-site security guard. So what you're telling me, I know I get San Francisco's expensive, but the Pelosi's are multi-millionaires. So Kermit the Frog, what I said when this came out, I'm going to quote myself, I said, you're telling me that the Pelosi's can't find a retired police officer, they can't pay him or her $100 an hour to sit outside the house to make sure this doesn't happen? That is like nothing to them. That's pennies. So to me, it's absolutely crazy. But to me, it says that, that they're just not all that concerned about security when they probably should be. Maybe they don't like, because of how liberal they are, maybe the Pelosi's don't like the idea of having private security, of being criticized for that when they're advocating to defund police and they're advocating for basically laws that make it easier for criminals, harder for police. Maybe they don't want to be called hypocrites having a police officer that an off-duty cop they pay $100 an hour to sit outside their door. Maybe they don't want to be called hypocrites. So I don't know. These are just guesses. But should someone like Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi, both of them have 24/7 security all the time? Yes, and this is why. Because there are absolutely crazy people out there who will do this kind of stuff. The world is a dangerous place, and I don't want anyone to be injured, but hopefully people see that now, and people who need security and can afford security actually get the security. Let's see. Steve Ladner, Ray Baker, he will not touch that subject because it can be explained away. The frog sounds like a okay, I don't know about that. All right, so that was the Paul Pelosi. Like I said, we've been waiting for a long time for that to come out. The next case I'm going to talk about, this is kind of a quick one, but it's kind of weird. I'm curious to see what anybody thinks. Ray Baker says, hang about that. What about the Cherokee, North Carolina Sheriff's Office video? I'm going to be honest, that's a case I'm going to have to look into for next week. Off the top of my head, I do not know. I do not know what that case is, so I'll have to look at that for next week. One more, humanoid dancer. Crazy breaks in looking for Nancy. Paul unlocks the door for the police. Crazy holds on to Paul. Yeah, I think that's absolutely what happened. And we just asked you, Ray Baker, if you could share a little bit about that case or where it is. NHL Pens is the host and LEO. I have 17 and a half. My experience is over 17 years as a police officer. I have a master's degree in criminal justice and a law degree. And I talk on this show, and I do content on Police Law News where I love talking about these things and debating people. Let's see, turkey sandwich. And the one thing I say about the police is I don't have time to decipher the good cop from the bad cop if my life is on the line. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Anyway, so this case is kind of weird. It's not even really a case. It's just a weird thing that's happening in New York City. So NYPD, so there's these Apple AirTags, and this past week NYPD found Apple AirTags under the hood of one of their marked patrol vehicles in Queens. So it's unknown. It's just a weird thing. It's unknown if who's ever doing this is trying to track specific officers, if this is just a prank. Is this creepy? Is this dangerous? I'm not sure, but it's one of those things like how would police, New York City has 40,000 cops who, they probably have, 20, 25, 30,000 different police cars. How can you check every single one? This is a strange thing. So we'll keep an eye on this story to see if it actually goes anywhere or if they can figure out the motivations behind. But the idea that these AirTags people are putting into police cars, it's kind of a strange thing, a little bit concerning. We'll have to see what happens there. And then now I'm going to answer a question. So on my TikTok, someone asked a question, kind of a general question. Last week I posted a bunch of different videos about First Amendment auditors and that kind of stuff in that area. And someone asked a question, do police officers have to identify themselves? So, the answer to that question is it's not a law. So there is no, I think federal officers has something different. I'm talking about local police. So in most states, there is no state law or city ordinance that says that police officers have to identify themselves. Most of the time, it's a policy. It's a police department policy that is enacted that basically tells police officers, hey, if a member of the public asks you for your name and badge number and who you work for, you have to tell them. So it's not a law, it's a policy. In my opinion, it's a good policy. It helps with police being seen as professional. Also, if we expect citizens, like we do when we talked about on the show already today, but if we expect citizens to follow the lawful commands of police officers should at least extend the common courtesy of saying who they are and where they work for. So police officers, it's not a law, it's a policy. I think it is a good policy. Also, one of those things on that, I don't like it when I watch these First Amendment videos and where someone says, ask for the police officer's name, and they're 10, 15, 20 or feet away, and they ask for the police officer's name and the officer goes, it's right here. And it's not one of those, big printed names. It's like a small little name tag. It's just unbelievably rude. I don't know why police officers do that, especially if they know that they're on video. And because here's the honest thing about it, and my eyes are bad. I assume I'm not the only one who doesn't have great eyes. That if a police officer told me that, I would literally have to get within a couple feet of them in order to actually read it. And we all know that if someone approached a police officer and got that close, all of us would say, hey, that's an officer safety issue, and we would all have a problem with it. Maybe even use force if someone walked up to us that quickly. So what I'm saying is I really think it's such in bad taste when police officers say, point to their name tag and said, it's right here, can't you read? If someone asks for your name and badge number, it's common courtesy. Just tell them. It's probably a policy where you work anyway. Let's see, Steve says, I give you hell and don't usually agree with you, but I appreciate you because you always give an honest opinion. Oh, well, I hope you're talking about me. That's nice. I try to give an honest opinion, and the thing is, we might not agree. We absolutely might not agree, and that's okay. And that's one of the reasons why when I come on the show, I encourage people. If I'd rather hear, I like it when I hear different opinions other than my own. That's what I think is fun. I'll be honest, one of the reasons I started doing this is because I missed the debate and discussion that I got in law school. So that was something I always had with people, me being more pro-police, and a lot of people, as you can imagine, in law school were not pro-police, and the back and forth, I honestly enjoyed it. About a year ago is when I started doing social media content because I missed that discussion and debate, and this is one of the ways I get it. So thank you, Steve. Even if we don't agree, that's okay. I love having the discussion. Okay, so I got two more things that I want to talk about, and this one thing is I try not to get political on the show, and I'm not. I'm just going to say what President Biden actually said. So last week he was doing some kind of a speech. I don't know if it was for MLK Day or I don't know what the context was, but he was giving a speech where he was saying things about police officers. And here's what President Biden said. He said, why should you always, talking about police officers, he said, why should you always shoot with deadly force? The fact is, if you need to use your weapons, you don't have to do that. Come on, man. I added the come on, man. But the idea that, so what Biden's saying is that when police officers shoot, they don't have to use deadly force. To me, that's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely nuts. I think it's dangerous that he spreads that kind of misinformation. And he's not the only one who does it, but I'm going to explain why. So essentially, President Biden is suggesting that police officers use their guns as less lethal force options. Instead of using tasers, beanbag shotguns, 40 mils, mace or OC or chemical munitions. So my position, and I've said this, 10, 15 times on the show, is that firearms, police officers should only use a firearm if there's a deadly force situation. That means either the police officer themselves or a citizen is in immediate or imminent risk of being shot to death or injured, seriously injured or killed. If that's the situation, then yes, police officers should use deadly force. Absent that, police officers should not be firing their guns. Let's say you have someone who's dangerous, okay? If you have someone who's dangerous, but no one's life is in danger and no one's in danger of great bodily injury, police officers should not be shooting to wound them to try to stop the situation. That's why we have tasers, 40 mils, all of these things. So my opinion, my position is that a firearm used from a police officer should only be the absolute most serious situations. What Biden is saying is that he basically wants to expand the use of firearms by police officers. Biden's basically saying that if you have situations where you don't want to kill someone, you should still be able to use a gun for those. So I disagree. So again, in this scenario, he probably doesn't realize it, but he's basically saying that police officers should be using their firearms for situations that don't call for deadly force. I think that's wrong. Put in the comments if you disagree with me, but I think that's absolutely wrong. I think that there has to be a lawful, legitimate threat of deadly force, that's the only time police officers should use their guns. Let's talk about a little bit of this. So let's go into why this is dangerous. So it's not just an old man talking where people, so I listen to that and I kind of laugh. I think it's not funny, but I go, what reasonable person would actually believe this? But the thing is, there are reasonable people who believe it, or maybe not reasonable, but there are a lot of people who believe stuff like this. So feeding into it doesn't help. And here's my example of this. So in Chicago, there was an officer involved shooting. The individual's name was Terrell Brown. So a little bit about Terrell Brown. Terrell Brown's mom called police in Chicago over the summer because Terrell was causing a disturbance in the house, and he threatened his mom with a knife. Okay, so police officers get there. They didn't just roll up randomly. They were called, hey, our son's threatening us. Mr. Brown is threatening us. Police officers get there, and as you can expect, Mr. Brown has a knife in his hand. Police officers yell at him multiple times to drop the knife, drop the knife. He doesn't do it. At some point, he charges at police officers and gets within a few feet of police officers with a knife. And again, predictably, the police officers utilized deadly force as they were being threatened with a knife. So that was a situation, completely reasonable, lawful, justified officer-involved shooting. The reason why you've never heard about it before is because it's all on body camera and it's 100% reasonable and justified, and even the most anti-police people probably aren't going to say anything about it, which is why you haven't heard about it. But Terrell Brown's mom, after Biden said this, she went to the news media and she said, my only question is, why didn't the police officers just shoot the knife out of his hand? Why did they have to kill him? Why did they just have to shoot the knife out of his hand? Now, anyone who's trained as a police officers in the military or even has firearm experience knows how silly that is, and I'm going to explain why. So basically, here's what you're asking police officers to do. The idea that police officers can shoot the knife out of someone's hand or shoot someone's pinky toe as they're running away in order to stop them. It's not realistic. It's not a realistic expectation of police officers. And again, here's why. So when police officers or anyone is involved in a situation like this, or specifically an officer-involved shooting, it is unbelievably stressful. We know that human performance greatly decreases when people are under stress. Not just police officers in shootings, but normal people out there. Like, the research and the psychology behind human performance under stress is out there. People do not perform as well under stress as they do without stress. So now you have an officer-involved shooting. This is, most police officers go an entire 20-year career, 30-year career, and are never involved in an officer-involved shooting. So when you are, it's probably literally the most stressful few moments of a police officer's entire life. Okay, so what you're saying is, in that most stressful moment, you want police officers to shoot arms or legs, which are small targets, which are also moving targets. So again, your expectation is that normal police officers shoot under unbelievable stress, are able to shoot accurately small moving targets. Again, that's absolutely insane. That doesn't make sense. Police officers are trained, they are not trained to shoot to kill. Police officers are trained to shoot to stop the threat. So if someone poses a threat, the police officers shoot them, and they're trained to shoot at center mass. Because think about it, again, when you're under stress, performance decreases. So trying to shoot at a small part is trying to shoot someone's pinky finger, you're probably going to miss a whole bunch of times. So police officers are trained to shoot center mass, whether that's someone's chest, or let's say the only thing that a police officer can see is someone's arm, or is someone's leg, or someone's back. They're trained to shoot center mass. And that, again, that's completely reasonable, because that's the biggest target, the most likely they're going to hit the target. Because think about this, if police officers shoot and they miss, where are those bullets going? Is it hitting an innocent person? So again, the idea that we want police officers to be shooting at small moving targets under unbelievable stress, literally makes no sense. It's absolutely insane. But again, I just wanted to point out that this is something that President Biden said last week, and then it was echoed by someone's mom who was shot by police, asking a question in the media. And the media puts this out there, asking the question, why didn't the police officers just shoot the knife out of his hand? So when you put bad ideas out there like that just don't make any sense, some people do listen. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. Let's see if we got any comments out this. Let's see. Brad Swad Pad. All right. Badge number. No, we go by names. I'm the officer so-and-so. And then he says, I'm from your area, and has a decent conversation. Okay, I subscribe to hear your side. Not everyone is in the right lane. Okay. Let's see. Humanoid dancer. Australian woman calls police, gets up to the car, gets shot dead. So human producer, thank you so much for mentioning that. So that was a case in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I believe her name is Justine Ruzinsick. And the officer's name is Mohammed Noor. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's off the top of my head. But yeah, that was a couple years before the George Floyd shooting, I think in like 2019. That was a case where a woman called police that there was Minneapolis police that she thought, she's a white lady, Australian woman, as you said, that she thought that there was a sexual assault going on in the alley. She calls police. She walks out to make contact with police to kind of give her side of the story, like a lot of people would. She knocks on the driver's side window of the police car. Mohammed Noor was sitting in the passenger seat. As she knocked on the window, she's not armed. She's in a bathrobe, right? She's not armed with anything. She doesn't look intimidating. She's not threatening, but she knocks on the window of the police. He pulls out his gun, reaches across his partner, and shoots and kills her. He was actually charged and convicted, and he's serving time for that now. That was an absolute horrific case. So what I say all the time is that, if you don't run from and fight with police, the chances of being injured or harmed by police are virtually zero. So I say virtually zero, and I don't say absolute zero, because Justine Ruzinsick, this is one of the cases where I cite where, sometimes things happen. It's incredibly rare. Now, I've been, I started my bachelor's degree in law enforcement and justice administration back in 2001. So I've really been following these issues in policing, since some in high school, but, definitely I've been pretty into it since 2001. That's what, I don't even know, 21, 22 years. I've been following it. And cases like Justine Ruzinsick are unbelievably extremely rare. That's why, off the top of my head, I'm able to just say her name and the name of the police officer and tell you the story without knowing that you were going to mention that case. And that's because it's so rare, right? There's 250 million interactions between citizens and police every single year. There's a couple Justine Ruzinsick cases, which are rare. They're horrible. I'm glad that the officer was arrested and prosecuted. But the idea that we're going to pretend that this is normal or that statistically this happens all the time, that just isn't an honest look at the data that we have. Let's see. Steve says, police in states are a bunch of glorified ticket writers that has never encountered people. Okay, I guess. So I don't know what Steve's thing is with tickets. But most cops that I know don't like writing tickets. They think it's irritating. They think it's a hassle. And they just don't really want to do it. They would prefer not to. So again, I don't know what agency. Again, it definitely could be something that some police departments issue tickets on. But I don't know. Let me tell this story. I've told this before, but I live in a bigger city. But my wife is from a small town in South Dakota. We go back a couple times a year. Me and my wife like to go to the gym, usually around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. As we're coming back, if it's the winter, we don't get bothered. But if it's about a 20-minute drive from the house in the middle of nowhere to the gym in the town. And if we're driving back at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and if it's in the summer, we usually go back for around the 4th of July. We are always stopped by police officers. This past summer, I was stopped twice. We're only there for 5 days. I was stopped twice. The year before, I was stopped once. So it's like, yes, in these small town, and I never got a ticket, but I was been stopped 3 times in the last 2 years, really for doing nothing. I think it's just because they're bored and there's nothing to do. So does that happen? Yes. Would I expect that? Again, but I lived in Chicago for 22 years. 22 years living in Chicago, I was never pulled over by police officers. So, again, and I was a teenager in Chicago, so my guess is I drove like shit way more then than I do now as a 40-year-old. But again, I spend, a total of 10 days in a small town, South Dakota, pulled over 3 times, 2 years in Chicago. That's including my mom and my dad as well. 22 years living in Chicago. Neither of my parents or me were ever stopped by police officers. So I think it really just depends where you live. So that's great. Human Dancer, great comeback there. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I try to follow these cases because I truly think that this stuff is interesting, and I try to stay on top of all this stuff. Let's see. NHL Pens. I'm starting to think this chat is a bunch of criminals. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. NHL Pens. Honestly, I think it's about half and half. Not criminals. That's silly. That's not what I meant. I think the chat is about half and half. Half people are pretty much pro-police, and the other half of people are not so much pro-police. And I try to be the calm center in the middle. And sometimes I say police did the wrong thing, sometimes not. And that's the kind of stuff that I like. Art Vandalay. I got 1 ticket in 33 years. It was for no seatbelt. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so the last case that I'm going to talk about for this week, and you know, it's one of those things where it's not often that people look like their crimes, all right? It's not a thing that happens, but here's what happened. This is a guy, his name is Stephen Martz, 47-year-old in West Virginia, okay? 47-year-old in West Virginia. He kidnapped a woman, and then he used a blowtorch to torture her. Now, as I'm explaining that to you, 47-year-old in West Virginia who kidnaps a woman and then uses a blowtorch against her, as I was explaining that, you probably, before we put the picture up, you probably had something in your mind of what someone like that would look like, and this is it. I mean, this is exactly what the person who does that in West Virginia looks like. How this guy hasn't become a meme yet is beyond me. It has to be. He looks absolutely crazy, and yeah, he's the absolute kind of person who would do this kind of thing. It's yeah, and you know, if there's a way, I know we have creative people out there in the comments who watch our show. If there's any way that someone could do a crossover meme with a Laverne Police Department and this guy, you know, we'd love to see it. Send it in. It'd be fantastic. Okay, so that's going to be the show today. Those are the cases I wanted to go through. I know we have a couple things for next week. So next week we're going to talk about. I know that someone gave us a case to look into. Also, you know, by then for sure the Memphis Police Department video is going to be out. We'll definitely go over that in detail. Again, my name is Daniel. Please follow me at Police Law News, YouTube, Substack, TikTok, everywhere. And if you haven't already, subscribed to our channel so you know when we do these live shows. I really want to thank everybody for being a part of it and for the great comments and the discussion going back and forth. I really appreciate it, and I hope that everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.